Okay, what is the domain? The domain is what x values are allowed. So there's no outputs over here, so that means no x values are allowed. Starting at -1 is the smallest x value in the domain. Okay, so keep having x values all the way through here. Here we jump from here to here, but x equals 2 is defined. It does have an output. And the x values continue having outputs all the way up until 5. Okay, so we use the square brackets because 1 and 5 are allowed. Okay, what is the range? Range is the y values or the outputs. So I start from the bottom, nothing, 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 and then right here, -2 is the smallest possible y value. And I actually do hit -2, so I use the bracket. And what's the biggest y value I hit? The biggest y value I hit is 5. And I actually get to 5, so again, I use the square bracket. Oops, sorry, this minimum is actually at -1, -2, -3. So again, the smallest y value is -3. Okay, for what value, or nope, 3, f of 2, meaning when x is 2, what is y? Okay, so x is 2 is right here. So we don't go to the empty circle, we go to the filled in circle. So when x is 2, y is -1. Okay, for what value or values of x does f of x equal 1? So where does y equal 1? So here's y equals 1. So again, empty circle does not count. So the only spot on the graph where y equals 1 is when x equals 3. Okay, James is hosting a party. Every guest should have a soda, but the sodas only come in packs of 6. How many packs does he need for x guests? So for this type of problem, I like to just pick a number for x. So let's say he invites 8 guests. Okay, so how many packs will he need? Well, he needs 2 packs, right? Because the first pack serves 6 guests, but there's 2 left over. So he'll have to buy a second pack and he'll have some left over. Okay, so this means when I input x equals 8, the output should be 2. So now I'll just try plugging in. When I input 8 over here, I get floor of 48 is 48. That's way too much. Try C next. So again, when I input x equals 8, that gives me an answer of 48, too much. Okay, I'll try this one. Okay, so before I do the floor, I do what's inside. So 8 divided by 6. So that'll be about 1.3 repeating. And then floor means round down. So choice B gives an output of 1, but we know that 1 pack is not enough. So let's try choice D. So again, 8 divided by 6 gives us 1.3 repeating. But the ceiling function tells us it tells us move it up to the next whole number. So even though it's closer to 1, we round it up to 2. So this is our correct answer. Okay, and if we think about it, it makes sense. If he needs enough soda for the guests, it's better to have too much, meaning rounding up, than too few, which would be rounding down. Okay, taxi charges customers flat fee of $5 and then $2 per minute. And if the number of minutes is a decimal, it's rounded up to the next whole number. Okay, so rounded up, it's definitely ceiling, but these are all ceiling. So flat fee of $5, that means that $5 happens a single time. It doesn't depend how many minutes. So it's either going to be A or B, because this tells me the y-intercept, or B, is 5. Okay, so now the question is, where should the 2 go? Inside the brackets or outside? So let's just choose a number. Let's choose 1.5 minutes. Okay, so what should the output be? Well, it says if the number of minutes is a decimal, it's rounded up to the next whole number. So the 1.5 minute ride is treated like a 2-minute ride. And then 2 minutes at $2 per minute means $4 there, plus the $5 flat fee means $9 total. Okay, so let's see which answer gives us $9. So when I plug x equals 1.5 into choice A, okay, so I do what's inside the symbol first, so 2 times 1.5 is 3. Okay, so ceiling of 3, it's already a whole number, so I keep it at 3. 3 plus 5 is only 8, so that doesn't work. Let me just make sure choice B works. So again, I input 1.5 for x. Okay, so now I do the ceiling first. I round 1.5 up to 2. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 5 is 9, like we wanted. Okay, evaluate f of 1.6. That means input 1.6 for x. Okay, so this is the floor function. So even though 1.6 is closer to 2, the floor means we always round down. So floor of 1.6 is 1. So that means the overall value is -2. Okay, for this absolute value function, evaluate g of -5. So that means input -5 for x. Okay, so absolute value symbols are treated like parentheses. You don't do the absolute value right away. You do what's inside first. Okay, so I keep the absolute value symbols, then inside -5 plus 3 is -2. Okay, and now we can do the absolute value. Absolute value of -2 is +2. And then we get 4 minus 4 is 0. Okay, every day the number of lily pads doubles. Which of the following would represent the amount of lily pads? Okay, so if the number doubles every day, that means that we have a multiplicative rate of change, meaning it's an exponential function. This is the only exponential function. Okay, which function would create this graph? So for this one, I like to look at the graph and pick a value. Okay, so when x is 1, looking at my graph, when x is 1, y should be 0. So let's see which of the answers this is true for. Okay, so if I input 1 for choice A, floor of 1 is still 1, so that's out. Okay, how about choice C? Ceiling of 1 is still 1. It was supposed to be 0. Okay, so let's try B and D. Okay, so floor of 0 is 0, that's correct. And let's try D. Ceiling of 0 is also 0. Okay, so B and D both fit the first requirement, so let's try a second requirement. Last time I chose a whole number, so I'll choose a decimal this time. Okay, when x is 1.5, y should be 1. Okay, so let's plug it in. Okay, so plugging into choice B, I get the floor of 0.5. So floor means round down. Rounding 0.5 down gives me 0. That's not what I wanted. Okay, so let's just check choice D to be safe. So ceiling of 1.5 minus 1 becomes ceiling of 0.5, and ceiling means to round up to 1, which is the output I wanted. Okay, measuring the distance between two trains. So after 3 seconds, they are 100 feet apart. After 5 seconds, they pass each other. And after 8 seconds, they are 150 feet apart. Okay, so distance is often absolute value. So we need to determine which absolute value function would fit these data points. So we can just plug in. So when x is 3, after 3 seconds, the output should be 100. Okay, so when I plug 3 into choice B, 50 times 3 is 150. The output's supposed to be 100. Okay, let's try choice C. So 50 times 3 minus 5, all in absolute value. 150 minus 5, absolute value of 145 is still 145, but again, the output was supposed to be 100. Okay, let's try choice D. Okay, so we do what's inside first, and now absolute value of -2 is +2. Okay, so that does give us the correct output, but let's try A as well. So again, x is 3. Okay, so both A and D give us the correct output. So when that happens, we just choose a second point. So when x is 5, y should be 0. So I'll try A first. when I input 5, I get 120, but it was supposed to be 0. So let me try choice D. Okay, inputting x equals 5. I do get 0. Okay, so tree starts with 4,096 leaves. Every day, 75% of the leaves that are still alive now die. So how many are still on the tree? Well, the tree starts with 100% of its leaves. If 75% die, that means 25% are still living. So it's 25% we want to use, not 75%. Okay, and then is it exponential or linear? Well, we're dealing with percents here. This would be saying that only 25 leaves die every day, but it's percentage based. That's why it's A. Okay, so for this problem, I'm just gonna pick an x value, and again, I'm gonna choose x to be a decimal. So let's say, or so that it turns into a decimal. So let's say that Phil gets $45 from his tax refund. How many $20 shirts can he buy? Well, he can buy 2 shirts that cost $20 each, so he spends $40 and he has some left over. So when you input 45, the output should be 2. So let's plug in and see what happens. Okay, so ceiling of 20 times 45, that's ceiling of 900, which is 900, way too much. Let's try choice C. 45 over 20, so we do what's inside first. This would be floor of 2.25. So floor means round down, so this does give us the correct output. Let's see if anything else does. Ceiling of 45 all over 20. So 45 is already a whole number, so we keep it at 45. 45 over 20 is 2.25, but he can't buy 0.25 of a shirt. And let's try choice D. So we do the floor first of 45. So 45 is already a whole number, we keep it at 45. Divide by 20 gives us 2.25. Again, he can't buy 0.25 of a shirt. Every mile run burns 150 calories, which function describes how many total calories are burned after running X miles. Okay, so it's definitely not exponential because that would mean that as you run more miles, you burn more calories per mile, but this is a linear situation. Every mile burns the same amount. Okay, so how come it's not ceiling or floor? Okay, there's no reason to round. If you run 0.5 miles, your body doesn't think you round up and ran 1 mile and they burn off more calories. They actually use the decimal. So since decimals are allowed for this problem, it doesn't make any sense to use ceiling or floor. So this was a linear situation. Okay, so to add these, I like to line them up by the exponent. So 2x cubed plus 7x squared plus x. I just wrote the first one. Then underneath, I'll line it up. So plus 2x squared minus 4x minus 12. And now I'll just add each column. 2x cubed plus 9x squared minus 3x minus 12. Okay, so now we're multiplying. So we need to distribute everything in the first set of parentheses, needs to multiply everything in the second. Okay, so 4a times 6a squared, 24a cubed minus 4a squared plus 8a. And then now when I write this one, I'm going to line it up underneath to make the math easier afterwards. 2 times 6a squared is positive 12a squared. 2 times negative a is minus 2a. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so adding these up, 24a cubed plus 8a squared plus 6a plus 4. Okay, so here we divide each individual term. Remember, terms are separated by pluses and minuses by the denominator. So I'll just split it up to make it easy to see. Again, every term in the numerator gets separately divided by the denominator. So this becomes x squared minus 4x plus 6. Okay, so 4, we got to do long division. Okay, so the tricky thing is for the number inside the division symbol, we want the exponents to count down by ones. We see here it jumps from x to the 5th to x to the 2nd. So for those missing values, I'm going to put in zeros. Okay, so how many times does x go into 6x to the 5th? 6x to the 4th times. Okay, remember our goal is to have these terms match up. So once they match up, we subtract or add the opposite. Remember, the whole goal is for these to cancel out. Okay, so now how many times does x go into 12x to the 4th? Okay, so again, once these match, add the opposite. Okay, x goes into 24x cubed, 24x squared times. Okay, x goes into 30x squared, 30x times. Okay, x goes into 60x 60 times. Oops. Okay, so no remainder in this case. So this was choice C. Okay, factor completely. So factor by GCF first. What do all of them have in common? The coefficients all have a 13. They all have at least one A, and they all have at least one B. So what's left over from this first term? I started with 3 A's. I took out 1. I've still got 2 A's left over. And started with 2 B's. Took out 1. I've still got 1 left over. Okay, 39 divided by 13 is 3. I have 1 extra A. And I don't have any B's left over. Negative 26 divided by 13 is negative 2. I took out the only A, but I started with 4 B's. I only took out 1. Now I have 3 B's left over. Okay, so it looks like choice A. Okay, factor by grouping. This means look at the terms 2 at a time. So looking at these first 2 terms, they both have 5x in common. So when I take 5x out of here, I just have an x left over. Negative 30x divided by 5x is negative 6. Okay, then over here, they both have a 2 in common. 2x divided by 2 is x. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. So these terms are identical, so I can factor by grouping. Okay, so this is choice D. Okay, just plain factor. So I know that to get 2a squared, that's going to come from 2a times a. And then, okay, so to get 5, I can do 1 and 5, or 5 and 1, or negative 1, negative 5, negative 5, negative 1. Well, I see that the middle term, the b term, is positive, so I know it's going to be plus and plus. Okay, and then I'm trying to get to 11a. If I put 5 here and 1 here, that'd give me 2a plus 5a is only 7a. So I'll put the 5 here and the 1 here, and I'll just double check. 2a squared plus 10a plus 1a is now 11a plus 5. Okay, what's the order of the polynomial? So first you find the order of each individual term. Okay, so order of the first term, you just look at the exponents. 3 plus 5, this has order 8. Okay, middle term has order 9, and this term has order 7. Okay, the order of the polynomial, you don't add up the individual orders, you just pick the biggest one. So this polynomial has order 9. Okay, so subtract these. I don't really like subtracting, I would rather add the opposite. Okay, so 2a squared is negative 2a squared. Negative 8xy is now plus 8xy. Okay, so now combine like terms. I have 3a squared plus 12xy plus negative 2a squared plus 8xy. Okay, so these become 1a squared or just a squared, and these combine to 20xy. Solve the trinomial. So first I'm going to factor by GCF. What do they all have in common? They all can be divided by 2, and I can factor out an x. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can factor this further. Okay, so how do I get x squared from x times x? How do I get negative 21? Well, 21 is, it's probably not 1 and 21 because that would lead to a weird middle term. It's probably 7 and 3. Okay, so because they multiplied to be a negative, that means you can only have one positive, one negative. And I see here that the middle term is negative, so the negative term had the greater absolute value. So that means it should be negative 7 and positive 3. So let me just double check. X squared plus 3x minus 7x is now negative 4x minus 21. Okay, so I could have 2x equals 0. I could have x minus 7 equals 0. Or I could have x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, so in this case, I have 3 possible answers. And I forgot to write it in on this one, all of these. Okay, solve for r. So I'm going to try to get one of the sides equal to 0. So I'll move these terms over. Okay, and these are kind of big numbers. So to make the numbers more manageable, I'm going to divide through by 5. Okay, so factoring this, I know that r squared will come from r times r. Okay, how do I get a positive 30 product but a negative b value? That means I must do negative times negative turns into positive. Okay, so then what multiplies to equal 30 but adds to 11? That'd be negative 5 and negative 6. Okay, so r minus 5 could equal 0, or r minus 6 could equal 0. So r could be 5 or 6. Okay, problem 12, just distribute it out. Okay, 8n squared plus 24n plus 2n, sorry, that's 1 times 2n, and then plus 6. Okay, name the coefficients. So coefficients do not include the constant, so not the term without a variable. So it's just 12 and negative 7. We do keep the sign. Okay, and simplify. So we just divide by what they both have in common.